these are the windows that I just finished trimming at my house. This is a Craftsman-style trim, and I'm going to take you step by step through how I achieved this look. So this is the starting point right here. These are Anderson 400 series windows, and you can see there's a groove in the window jamb, and that groove is meant to accept the extension jamb. So this piece right here on my table saw is my test piece for an extension jamb. You just basically make a rabbet. There's my table saw set up, a sacrificial fence, and a dado blade. And I made a test rabbet on one side, made an adjustment, made a rabbet on the other side, and I just took it back from the garage back into my house and test fit it. So you can see how that locks into the window there. There's a little bit of a more up close view. You can see how the rabbet interlocks with the window. So that's what we're trying to achieve, just a nice tight joint there. And that looks like it's going to be a winner. It should fit in pretty snug, and the rabbet on the extension jamb locking into the window frame just helps to keep the reveal nice and straight. It's just a great starting point for the window trim. So here I am. I have a cut list. I'm back out in the garage. I'm just going to take these 1x6s and run that rabbet down one side of the board. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to make the same rabbet on the other side of the board. And I'm basically going to get 2 extension jambs out of one piece of 1x6. So I'm just working through my whole pile here. I have 4 windows that I'm doing this on. So it's easy to just make a good setup on your table saw and just batch them all out. So just ripping the rabbet on one side, spinning it around, ripping the rabbet down the other side of the jamb. And then here I am splitting the pieces in half. Figured out what the width of the extension jamb should be. Set the table saw rip fence and just made 2 pieces out of the one piece of 1x6, and that center piece is just garbage then. So now I'm going to pre-assemble the extension jambs. So I grab my brad nailer, and here I am with the 2 side pieces and the top piece. Just a little bit of glue and some 18 gauge finish nails. Tack this together. Then I just took that assembly back into the house and test fit it on the window. And it should be a nice snug fit. So here I am just messing around with that, making sure that this is going to work out all right. And it almost just stays there on its own if you have a nice fit. But ultimately we're going to nail this off. And that's what I'm doing there, using a straight edge and some shims to make sure that that extension jamb is nice and straight. And then just nailing through the extension jamb into the rough window opening through the shims. Taking my time, just making sure everything's nice and plumb and straight. This is really the starting point for everything else. So I got that first one done and then buzzed around the room and took care of the others. It's fitting nice. So going around the room, setting the extension jambs in there first. Lots of shims. Make it nice and straight, nail it all off, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. So once we get to that point, go back and cut all the shims. These oscillating tools are like by far the best way that I've found to buzz these shims off. So now we're going to start on the windowsill. So when you figure out the overall length of your windowsill, you want to make sure that you have the ears of the sill long enough to receive the casing that's going to come down the side of the window. So I have a rough length to start with there, and there I'm marking where the extension jambs intersect into the windowsill. Because we have to go out to the table saw and make a notch on both ends so that that windowsill can reach back into the window itself, and those ears on the sides will just butt along the drywall. and make a nice tight fit. So here I'm using the sliding miter gauge to make a nice cut, and then one side of this windowsill I'm using the rip fence for to take that notch out, because the drywall was perfectly parallel with the windowsill. Now on this other side of the windowsill, the drywall kind of tapers back, which is a pretty common problem to have at a window opening. If it's a corner beaded opening, oftentimes it's not really parallel with the windowsill. So I'm kind of making like a back cut, so to speak. So because the cut that I need to make is not parallel to either side of the windowsill here, I'm kind of freehanding this. And here we are, just kind of taking my time making this notch here. And this is going to make a little more sense once I take it back inside. And then of course you need to rip the windowsill to its ultimate depth, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to leave a little bit of an overhang off the front. And then before I take it back inside and nail it in place, I want to do a little round over on the windowsill. So I went to the router table, a little round over bit, and I'm just easing the edges of the windowsill here. The router table makes this a very simple process. So back inside, I'm just screwing down this piece of 2x4 here, this scrap, so I don't need to stack up a whole bunch of shims. That's going to be my starting point to shim from at that point. Fitting it in there. Took the combination square apart so I could use the little level portion of it. And there I'm just sticking shims in, checking the level, and just using a 16 gauge nailer, nailing down through into that 2x4 block. So that side by my left hand there, that's the part of the windowsill that was not parallel with the drywall. So I had to kind of make that goofy back cut with the table saw when I made that notch. So just going along here, fussing with it, shimming as needed. And then once the windowsill is set the way I want it, we move on to the side casing. So this is just a 2.5 inch wide piece of 1x. I ripped 2 of those out of 1x6 also. And I'm going to go down here and nail that off to the wall with the 16 gauge nailer. That goes from the trim right through the drywall into the 2x6s along the rough opening of the window. And then I'll also come back with this 18 gauge finish nailer and nail the window casing into that extension jamb. Pretty straightforward. Left side done. Then I'll do the right side, obviously. And I'm holding that casing back from the extension jamb about 1/4 of an inch. So there's going to be a 1/4 inch reveal, a little shadow line between the extension jamb and that window casing. So just repeating the same process here. 16 gauge finish nailer into the framing. And then I'll fall back with that 18 gauge nailer and nail that piece of casing into the extension jamb. Then the next thing to do is to put the apron on. And figuring out the length of the apron is pretty simple. The ends of the apron should basically be plumb with the outside edge of the window casing. And here there was a little bit of a shim underneath of there yet that was fouling me up, so that oscillating multi-tool zipped that out nice and easy. So get the apron set, And you should just have one straight line from the side of your casing down past the sill to the edges of that apron. And then of course the windowsill ears stick out about 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch. That's really a preference, how much you'd like your windowsill to project out past the sides there. So 16 gauge nailer, nailing that apron off. And now I'm going to be working on the header assembly, the top assembly of this Craftsman-style casing. So one of the components of that is this little, I would call it like a lattice piece that sits on the bottom of it. And I needed to make that up, so I ripped a piece of 1x to 1 1/8 inch, and then I need to cut it to thickness, which is 9/16. So just going to run this piece through, and then with a cut like this, I'll run it in most of the way, turn the table saw off, then just pull the piece out once the blade stops, spin it around, restart the saw, and put the piece back into the blade, finish the cut. So the larger piece on the left is the one that I need. And here I have it sanded up, and now I'm going to glue it to a piece of 1x6 that I ripped to 4.5 inches, maybe 5 inches, 5 inches. I ripped that piece to 5 inches, and the top ½ inch is going to be covered by a piece of crown molding. So you'll end up with about 4.5 inches showing. So 23 gauge pin nailer, just pinning that piece of lattice to the bottom of the casing. And now here I am test fitting the molding, like a small crown molding. And here's where a ½ inch of that 1x is disappearing, because it'll be behind the molding. So nailing that off with the 23 gauge pin nailer, which is fantastic because you don't even hardly see the head of the nail. You don't even really need to fill it. The paint essentially fills the nail holes on the 23 gauge nails. Little glue on the mitered return here. Just pin that, and of course there you go. You got the lazy hands, you bump the thing all around. These pieces can be a little bit tricky to get pinned, and you really got to watch your fingers when you're nailing this stuff off. Another way I'll do this is with CA glue. Sometimes in lieu of the wood glue, you could just use some Star-Bond CA glue on one piece, spray the activator on the other piece, and just touch the two together, and within 5 seconds you have a really nice super glue bond. But here I'm using nails and some wood glue. So again, just watching my fingers, just fussing with it, pinning it in place. And there we have it. So all you have to do at this point is take this back inside and set that on top of the side casings. Make sure everything's lined up nice, and nail it off with the 16 gauge nailer into the framing of the window. And that's the last step. And I will usually batch 5, 6, 7, 8 of those header assemblies all at the same time when I'm out there in the shop. It's just a lot easier to mass produce them if you know you're going to need more than one. And there you have it. A little bit of a close-up of the details. Really nice style of trim for the old farmhouse that I have here. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something.